take a couple questions. Yes.
How do you feel about safety nets for people that need help? Is that safe?
Right. The question is, how do I feel about safety nets? I think the government can have a role in safety nets. The more local, the better. If there's going to be a safety net, though, the most important thing about a safety net is that we only put people in the safety net who can't help themselves, and that we try to make it temporary, and that we try to remember that the other group of people, we can't make the safety net so large that the other group of people is not big enough to pay for all of it. So I think most of us here can acknowledge that we can have a role for government in helping people who cannot help themselves. But it has to be temporary. I'll give you an example of how sometimes we have misplaced humanitarianism and it makes it worse. Disabilities would be one. We made it too easy to get disability, so you got people looking like me walking around on disability, and then there's somebody who's a quadriplegic and can't move their wheelchair except for with their mouth, and that person needs resources and I don't. You know what I mean? So you have to be careful who you let become part of the system. Another good example of misplaced humanitarianism or liberalism would be unemployment insurance. The Democrats said, oh, we need to make it 99 weeks. It was always paid for 26 weeks. It was administered by the states. There's a tax on the workers and the employees here, and it goes into a fund that's there for unemployment. But people say, oh, well, it's a tough time, let's make it 99 weeks. But you know what happened? They looked at it. This statistic has been looked at over and over again. If you've been out of work 99 weeks, and she's been out of work 3 weeks, and you come in to get a job here, guess who always gets hired? The 3-week person, because they think there's something that's not quite right about you being out of work 99 weeks. And I'm not saying it's easy being out of work, but the thing is that there's always going to be workers that can come in. The employers always choose the ones who've been out of work for the least amount of time. So as you let people get on the rolls too long, you start trying to help them, you've actually done a disservice to them because you've made them less employable. Anybody else? Yes?
So I had a question about our interest in East Asia. So in terms of our basic strategic priorities, one thing would be protecting our allies like the Philippines or South Korea, protecting their core territory. A second thing would be maintaining openness of the sea lanes. And the third thing, which has come on the agenda recently, is whether we have a responsibility to get involved in contested fishing and mineral rights. And so if the Philippines or another country as an ally has a contested fishing or mineral rights issue with China, is it our responsibility to get involved? Is that in our national interest or not?
I think a lot of the answer to that question goes to temperament. So if there is a dispute over fishing rights over these little rocky islands that are off the coast of China, and there may be somewhat legitimate historical arguments on many different sides of the equation, do you want someone who at the drop of the hat will send aircraft carriers and we're at war with China? I think you want someone who is reasonable and will try to figure out a diplomatic solution to things without making rash behavior. We do have interest commercially, and we do have an interest in keeping the commercial lanes open. But I think the main thing is that you want somebody with temperament, or with the right kind of temperament, who doesn't make a rash decision that all of a sudden leads to World War III. Anybody else?
With the Middle East manipulating the oil prices right now, and effectively manipulating our stock market, or having a direct effect on the stock market. I know I'm not typically a tariff type person, a protecting person, and putting tariffs on like other goods and services. Would you ever consider putting a tariff on a barrel of oil coming from the Middle East to stabilize the price of oil and to maybe generate some income to help us deal with the price of the Middle East?
Well, I'm not also in general for punitive tariffs. The tax plan that I put forward would have a uniform tax on people who wanted to import goods to us or export goods to us, such as oil. And the good news now is we're actually getting to the point where we may be getting free of importing oil because we're making so much domestically. So the price drop is hurting a lot of oil producers in our country, but the good news is we're making a heck of a lot of natural gas and a heck of a lot of oil. In fact, one thing good that happened in the last 6 months is we have now legalized the export of oil for the first time since the 1970s. So at this point, I'm not sure on oil would be such a great thing, but there are things where other countries are subsidizing exports to us, like steel is a big problem with China, and we have jobs that we're losing in Kentucky. And I think through these trade arrangements that we should enforce, and we shouldn't let China subsidize and undercut our industry here. Young man in green, the Woodstock.
Yeah, I'd like to ask, you said that you want to get rid of the NSA, but if you do that, what's your strategy on catching those?
I've really more said I don't want the NSA to have